Hi, I'm Father Anthony Hannon from Enviam Patches Retreats, and this is To Prepare His Way. In this video, I'd like to explain in a very succinct way how addiction works, how someone becomes addicted to a substance or to some other behavior. To do this, let us imagine the range of human states of being. We could say emotional states for simplicity's sake. So let us say that this represents the low end of the scale, and this represents the high end of the scale. And this is normal. We live normally we live here. This is kind of the balanced state. But to be human, we experience a whole range of emotions, a whole range of states of being. And there's all sorts of reasons and benefits for us that we can feel those things. We don't want to turn that kind of emotional tap off. That's not good. Then what are we, robots or something? No, this is important. So, I don't know, let's think of some examples. You win the lottery. That's a high, right? You go bankrupt. That's a low. You get a phone call from someone you care about and they just had a baby. Wow, that's great. Oh, you get a phone call, a terrible thing has happened. My baby died. Oh, that's terrible, right? Okay. You wake up in the morning, you had a good night's sleep. You look outside, there's a beautiful blue sky. You go outside, you smell the fresh air, you hear the birds chirping. That's a very positive thing. Maybe you wake up, you had a terrible sleep. Oh no, you got a headache. Oh no, it's pouring rain, it's freezing rain outside. You got to go to work. Oh no, these are negatives. But thankfully, we're not in any of these extremes all the time, right? So we live in this, a healthy person lives in normal, and then these other things happen, and we experience life a little bit more fully. Someone might take a substance. Let's take, for example, alcohol. And for many people, drinking alcohol, gives them a positive effect. So for some people, I've heard explained that like the edge is taken off. They're kind of wound up or something. They've got a lot of stress in their life. They take a drink of alcohol or a few drinks of alcohol, and it takes the edge off. They relax or something like that. For some people, they feel like they're not very confident and they drink alcohol. For some people, they call it liquid courage. All of a sudden, they feel more confident or something like that. Some people think that they're becoming more funny when they drink alcohol. Okay, whatever. For me, alcohol was never really like that. I think when I was younger, I drank. I decided not to drink when I turned 22. But in my late teens and early 20s, I did experiment with alcohol. I got kind of tired, quite frankly, of being the only one who didn't drink. So I started experimenting with it. But it was never really a positive for me. I didn't like the taste. I would get dizzy, get a headache, and then I'd say, well, let me drink a little bit more, because maybe that's the problem. I'm not drinking enough, or I'm not drinking fast enough, or something like that. Well, then I'd just get really dizzy. And then I remember a few times I threw up. And then the next day I'd have a hangover, I'd have dry mouth, and didn't feel well at all. So these are negatives. But for many people, it's some sort of perceived positive. Like I say, I think one time in my drinking career, in those few years, I felt giddy or something like that. Anyway, here's what happens. They get a perceived positive. The substance, the alcohol in this case, goes through their system. Over time, it wears off, and they return to normal. Sometimes they may have a hangover or get sick, but even there, they return to normal. What happens though over time, so they keep using it, they say, okay, this is good, this is, I don't go nuts or whatever, so they like the feeling, they like the social aspect, or whatever the positive thing is. But what ends up happening is that almost imperceptible to them, over time, it doesn't quite bring them kind of right to dead center in the normal range, it brings them a little bit lower. And therefore, it takes more of the substance over time. They build up a tolerance, we say. So it takes more of the substance to get them to that perceived positive. But then eventually what ends up happening, they get these kind of negative effects, and it can't bring them up here anymore. It's almost like they're here in the lower range of normal, or feeling uneasy even, right? And then they might even crave for the substance, but whatever the case, they knew that substance was reliable to bring them into a positive experience, and it doesn't do it for them anymore. And what ends up happening is they try to get there, and they end up, without intending to, they end up becoming intoxicated. And what ends up happening there then is they feel terribly frustrated with themselves. They might even feel ashamed or guilty. They may regret things that they've done when they're intoxicated. So a lot of times what ends up happening is they end up lashing out at those closest to them. So you might have heard the saying, people say, well, the true self comes out when they're under the influence. Well, not really. The true self does come out, but you have to understand it properly. When they start calling those around them names, or saying, hey, who wouldn't drink if I had someone like you in my life, things like that, that's not really what's going on. But the true self is coming out because they actually kind of hate themselves. So they're lashing out. Because this is what we tend to do as human beings. If we feel like we're not happy, we're not feeling uneasy, we look around, we try to figure out, why am I not happy? And we try to usually find something or someone outside of us that is annoying us or something like this, and we say, that is what, or you are making me unhappy. But that's not reality, folks. The reality is, someone said a long time ago, happiness is an inside job. It has nothing to do with really, ultimately, with what is outside of us. It's what's inside of us. So there you go. That's how addictions work. And different substances work differently on different, for people, right? On different people. But there's certain properties, like things like heroin, opioids, and stuff like this. I have no idea what the perceived positive is for people, but my understanding is that they crash really quick. So with alcohol addiction, in many cases it might take years or decades before someone gets to that stage where they kind of need the substance, at least physiologically, but and they're getting in this kind of cycle that I explained. But with something like heroin, they crash really quick, and then they don't kind of rebound. So they're in physical pain, emotional pain, until they use the substance, which again doesn't bring them a perceived high, and it just brings them up into kind of coping level. So this is why, many of these drugs, in many countries, they are illegal. I think they should be illegal, just to discourage people from using it, to send out the message that they are dangerous. In Canada here, they just made cannabis legal. And my opinion, that's a terrible, terrible mistake on all sorts of levels. But the main thing is it's a hallucinogenic drug. Many people do become addicted to it, contrary to, again, kind of popular myth that it's not addictive. No, it's very addictive. You won't find a reputable treatment center anywhere who would say that it's okay to use cannabis, that it's not addictive. And Anyway, these things, they get people addicted, and they get the hook in them a lot stronger, okay? You have other things, of course, that are legal, like caffeine and nicotine. And again, I would say for those of you who are caffeine drinkers and who are nicotine users, that, again, it's probably not really a high. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really into those things. I do drink colas that have caffeine in them, but it seems like people with coffee, they seem to get headaches if they don't have it, and things like this. So I think what ends up happening is you've got this kind of negative state, and then you drink your coffee or you smoke your cigarette or whatever, and it kind of makes you kind of functional in the normal range. Anyway, leave your comments if you're addicted to those things, or if you have been addicted to those things. You can leave your comments and share your experiences, please. But we can also be addicted, I'm going to put that in quotation marks, to things that are not substances. And in this case, I'll say things like YouTube videos. And don't get me wrong, I want you to watch these videos. They're not intrinsically evil or something like that. None of these, it's not, the internet is not intrinsically evil, okay? Even though there's bad things on it and there's very good things on it. But when we're on front of our computer screen, we're not necessarily aware of it, but all the lights and everything coming out, this is stimulating our brain. And then we hear sounds, and the same thing can happen with music or the radio. Maybe you get in the car and immediately you turn on the radio. And I'm going to suggest to you that all of these things, what's happening is we are artificially stimulating ourselves. Again, I'm not putting this on a moral plane as though it's evil, but I'm just saying this is the reality of what happens. Our brains get stimulated. Just as an experiment, if you want to, why don't you just say to yourself, and commit to this for a couple days, not turning on the internet or the TV or the radio, just for a couple days. This is part of what In V and Patches Retreats is about, that people can come here, have a day or two or more of complete kind of just natural noises. You hear the birds in the air. You may hear the odd plane or the train in a distance now and then, but generally all you're hearing is nature. And just to give yourself a break from all of this artificial stimulation and just see what happens. It's my experience that sometimes what happens is you feel a little down. I've felt that. I feel a little bit depressed. Well, then, you go back and you turn on the radio, you get some stimulation or something like that, and you find now I feel better. Do you not think that the best scenario would be not to artificially stimulate ourselves, either with a substance or with all of these other electronic things? Again, I'm not saying that it's morally wrong or sinful or anything. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm not saying those things are morally sinful. They could be, but I'm going to say, in general, that's not the case. But do you yearn maybe for what is my most natural state? And I'm going to tell you something. If you're living in that natural state without substance assistance or artificial stimulation, that blue sky becomes bluer. The songs of the birds become more beautiful. Our humanness becomes more rich. That's the way addictions work. I'll explain more and more on addictions and codependency and dynamics in future videos, but I did want to make this one fairly short. So leave your comments, subscribe if you're not subscribed, please, and hit the notification bell so that you might receive more videos when I upload them. And in the meantime, In V and Patches, into the way of peace.